Hi guys, and welcome back to the sound of crashing glass. On loop. Constantly. Because that's how earthquakes work, apparently. Just listen to its melodic tones. I don't think anything in the OST can compare to this. I kinda don't wanna listen to this for longer than I have to, so I'm just gonna keep carrying on right now. Hoping I can get to the end of chapter 10 before then. As light as Shogun's body was, it was still nearly 20 kilograms. It was hard enough just carrying him around Shibuya, but it was even worse factoring in all the uneven roads. I wasn't one for exercise. I mean, hell, my daily routine consisted of me just sitting in front of my computer all day. I considered finding a way to get Shogun to the hospital, but with Shibuya the way it was, I doubted I could even get an ambulance. Even the gentle hill that was Dogenzaka was doing its best to drain all my energy. I could barely breathe, and my whole body was gushing out buckets of sweat. Wiping the sweat off my forehead, I took a quick break to catch my breath. Hello, Ayase. I'm sorry, Ayase, but your voice sounds like crashing glass. Please stop singing. Is there like a glass factory in Shibuya or something? Suddenly, I could faintly hear someone's voice. Someone was singing, their voice rife with loneliness, but not without hope. Their soothing voice washed over me. I'd heard this singing somewhere before. Back at that concert. Even in spite of the glaring lights overwhelming my vision, and the blaring sounds shaking the entire airtight building, I'd still managed to take it in. But this time, I was in the middle of a road, where I couldn't see a single sign of life. And yet, in the center of this collapsed city dominated by death, I could hear her. I put Shogun down and surveyed my surroundings once again, but the only people I could see were the collapsed corpses strewn across the city. I did my best to avoid looking at them, instead focusing on trying to find Ayase. Where the hell was her voice coming from? The road in front of me was wholly caved in. Looking at it, the hole it had created was incredibly big. There was definitely a subway tunnel underneath it. I didn't want to believe it at first, but even so, I peered down from the edge of the hole. It was about 5 meters deep. There was a pretty fair amount of rubble piled up at the bottom. And that was where Ayase had fallen. I jumped down into the hole. I didn't stick the landing whatsoever, instead basically slamming into the rubble while just barely avoiding falling over. Hello there. Ayase's leg was pinned under a pretty sizable slab of concrete, stopping her from moving. I really did give it my best effort, but moving it just wasn't possible on my own. What the hell was she doing here? And that Norosei guy kidnapped her?
Nanami! Nanami!
Enduring the pain in my legs, I stood up and yelled out for my sister, but I got no reply. Looking around me, I only saw one other person besides Ayase. There was a pretty hefty woman lying face down on the ground. While she wasn't moving, she only seemed to be unconscious. Nanami and one other person were absent. Maybe they'd been buried alive. I had to find them right this second. My eyes shot to the top of the hole. There was enough dust to make anyone hack their lungs out. But beyond that, I could see the circular shape of the sky above. I thought about Shogun, who I'd laid up on the road up there. I remembered what Rimi had told me.
妄想をすればするほど本物のあなたの命が削られていっちゃうんだ。
But I couldn't hesitate here. I drew my D-sword entirely from thin air. Consciously avoiding looking at her leg, I sat down near Ayase and peered at her face. I stared into her eyes, refusing to look at anything else. That should do the trick.
妄想するんだ。
A strong one. A really strong one.
綾瀬の足の上にある瓦礫は大きなものじゃない。数は多いけど一つ一つは小さい。重くない。簡単に足を引っ張り出せる。他の二人も助け出せる。
Me and Ayase. We only needed mutual recognition between us two gigalomaniacs. Besides, because once we had that, then our delusion was sure to become reality. Out of nowhere, Ayase smiled in relief. She gently stroked my cheek with her fingers.
グラジオールの導きね。君がここに来てくれたのは。
But isn't Gladio the one you want to kill? I'm very confused here. I blinked nervously. Exactly as I deluded it to be, the large slab of concrete pinning Ayase's leg had now turned into a heap of smaller pieces. Pushing away some of the debris, Ayase slipped her leg right out. I really hadn't expected that to go so damn well. Starting to move, she massaged her ankle. Luckily, her injuries didn't seem all that bad.
綾瀬の歌が聞こえたんだ。それに導かれたんだよ。
そう。よかった。歌い続けてきて。
Helping Ayase up, I stood and took a look around.
ナナミは
I still didn't see any signs of my sister. Had my delusion failed after all? Or was not on me already? I began to feel anxious. I heard a voice, looking in the direction of it. I saw a hand reaching out from a gap inside the rubble. And so I took that hand, gripped its slender fingers, and peered into the gap. You a jump scare!
Huh.
The gap was almost like a tunnel, and then that tunnel was a familiar-looking girl wearing glasses. It felt like it had been ages since I'd last seen Yua.
なぜか急にこの隙間ができて、ついさっきまで全く身動きが取れなかったんですけど。
The girl averted her eyes from me, with a face that seemed almost apologetic.
手をしっかり掴んでて。
I tightly gripped Yua's hand, and then I pulled as hard as I possibly could away from the gap. Ayase helped as well. With the two of us pulling Yua with all our might, she managed to break free from the rubble without too much trouble.
りがとう、CoZ。
She was covered from head to toe in dust. A few pieces of concrete were tangled up in her long hair. But even with all of that, Yua seemed completely uninjured. And now, Nanami. Leaving Yua with Ayase, I started to search for Nanami. Given Yua had managed to break free, I could only assume that my delusion had actually worked. And if that was true, then Nanami should have been in some rubble somewhere that I could yank her free from. And lo and behold, that was exactly the case. As I searched through tons and tons more rubble, I managed to catch a glimpse of Nanami's face through a crack in the debris.
Nanami!
I called out to her, but she didn't respond. She must have fainted. Reaching out, I went to touch her shoulder, but hesitated. The memory from yesterday flashed into my mind, of Nanami vanishing into particles right before my eyes. No, this has to be the real Nanami. Gathering my resolve, I grabbed her by the shoulder, or more specifically, by her blouse. I could actually touch her. I could actually feel her warmth. Just like I had with Yua a bit ago, I pulled her out with all my strength. Unlike Ayase and Yua, however, Nanami's uniform was stained with blood. Her hand especially was covered in red. Regardless, I laid her down on the ground, then went to check her breathing. She seemed to be in pain, but she was still breathing.
Yokatta.
Even so, I couldn't help but worry about her right hand. It was absolutely covered in blood. And yet, when I tried to grab it, my fingers slipped right through it. I guess this is technically phantom limb syndrome to the extreme when you think about it. A delusional hand? That could only mean Nanami's right hand was...
ごめん。ごめん。巻き込んで。
A groan leaked from Nanami's mouth. Her face was caked in dust. I gently stroked her cheek and watched as her eyelids slowly began to open. Her gaze faintly wandered for a moment before finally landing on me.
ナナミ。
And at that very moment, Nanami's expression warped and changed. Tremendous tears broke free from her eyes. Her left hand firmly grasped my own. She whispered to me so happily, it felt as if she never wanted to let me go. But when I heard those whispers, I responded with a slight shake of my head.
ナナミの本当のお兄は僕じゃないよ。
Whoosh! My memories are so cloudy. That was how Nishijo Nanami felt. Her brother's words had been the trigger in her heart, and now she felt as if she had two brothers. However, what her heart told her was that it was not just as if she had to, but that she really did have to. Her mind flashed back to the past, and she remembered her two brothers' faces. One of them seemed quite pathetic. One of them was covered in wrinkles. And yet, despite these distinctions, she was still convinced that she only had a single brother. Something was not adding up. Something between her memories and her cognition. What was reality? What was illusion? She did not know, and that scared her. To escape this, she attempted to empty her mind of all thoughts. when suddenly her own voice audibly rippled outward. Nana, you need to stay strong. The next thing she knew, she was standing in a hallway illuminated by the setting sun. She could smell disinfectant, and before her stood a rather plain door. She reached out toward it and took hold of the handle, and then, through no will of her own, her hand opened the door.
ああ、お兄、またご飯食べないつもり？ちゃんと食べてっていつも言ってるじゃん。出ないと元気になんないよ。あ、もしかしてグリーンピースが入ってるから？子供じゃないんだし、いい加減好き嫌いやめたら？そりゃナナだってグリーンピース嫌いだから残したくなる気持ちはわかるけど、ちゃんと食べてくんないとナナが怒られるんだからね。あの怖い看護師長さんに。
ナナミ、
何？
今まで辛く当たってごめん。
お兄が謝るなんて珍しいじゃん。
もう僕のために無理をする必要はないんだ。
何言ってるの？
僕は身を隠さなくちゃならなくなった。だからお前はもうここには来なくていい。
何のつもり？
さようなら。
And that was where her memories cut off. Those memories about her real brother. Her brother had been suffering from a serious illness, leading her to graciously spend many years tending to him in the hospital. No matter how much time had passed, she knew she had to stay strong so that she could could best take care of him in his time of need. For the past year and a half, these things had disappeared from her memory entirely. She had forgotten that those memories had even existed. And in exchange for that, her brother had continued living on his own in good health, right there in Shibuya. Her mother had asked her to routinely check in on him. Leading her to sometimes drop by on the way home from school. And thus she had done so, thinking nothing of it. After all, he was her brother. Checking in on him might as well have already been routine. She had never housed any doubts about it.
どうしてナナは忘れちゃってたんだろう。
Nearly 30 minutes had passed since she'd been rescued from beneath the rubble, and now she had finally been reunited with her real brother. There he was, lying still on the road. He was still breathing, but remained unconscious. His body was as small, wrinkled, emaciated, and incredibly weak as she remembered. It was the brother from so long ago whom she had always known.
こんなのひどいよ。ナナはお兄に文句ばっかり言ってたけど。
Though her brother did not reply, she clung to his small body all the same, letting loose a flood of tears.
お兄のこと一度だって忘れたいなんて思ったことなかったのに。勝手だよ。わがまますぎだよ。
The sound of metal lightly scraping against something came from within her brother's clothes. And a moment later, something slipped free from his pocket. It was what Nanami had been searching for. When she lost her right hand, she lost it as well. A flimsy, cheap bangle with a snowflake motif. Confused, she stared at her real brother's face, but his eyes, buried in wrinkles, did not open in return. Nanami picked up the bangle with her left hand. She remembered how it felt to touch. It was her brother's first present to her, Nanami's greatest treasure. Nanami lifted her gaze, unconsciously searching for her other brother. He was holding a long sword, and his back was turned to her. But he was walking away. He was leaving this place. Even without saying a word, Nanami could understand that much. The fact that he might leave without saying even a word to her left her wrought with a terrible loneliness.
行っておいで。
Nanami's brow furrowed in confusion, and she softly searched around herself.
今声が
It was her brother's voice. That much she indeed remembered. The voice of her brother, who should have been unconscious.
彼は僕と一心同体。もう一人のお兄なんだから。
Whether it was truly her brother's voice or a mere hallucination, Nanami could not tell. And yet, regardless of which it was, she whispered all the same.
分かった。
She whispered to her brother, who still lay on the ground. Nanami stood up and walked toward her older brother's back. She hardly had any strength left. Day after day, she'd been trapped in a pitch-black room, forced to take part in some sick tableau of agonizing crucifixion. She could not even remember how many times she had thought she would die. Her right hand in particular caused her tremendous amounts of pain, as if a chisel was being struck into it all the way to the bone. The sensation that she lacked her hand, together with the illusion that it still remained, were tearing her mind in two. She was exhausted, both mentally and physically. If she lost focus, there was no doubt she would fall to the ground, too drained to get back up again. Therefore, she had to make a desperate effort to reach her hand out at this very instant. Even if it took more effort than she could give, she would do everything in her power to make him stop.
待って。
She narrowly managed to squeeze something out, and thankfully, he had heard. He halted his stride and looked back toward Nanami. Even though she had managed to stop him, she was lost on what exactly to say to him. The reality that this person was not her brother at all. The conviction that this person was her brother to the end. Those two feelings had blended together in her head, making them harder to discern. But she gripped her bangle tightly in her left hand. It had been his gift to her, one that felt cold to the touch, but warm to the heart. The very existence of this bangle linked both him and her together. That was how she felt. And that answer was all she needed. Her hesitation instantly faded.
お兄は本当のお兄じゃないかもしれないけど、頼りにならなくて、たくさんで、アニメキャラのお人形さんばっかり集めてて、口が悪くて、愛想もなくて、意地悪なことばっかり言うけど、お兄もナナのお兄だよ。
Trying her hardest to fight back her tears, Nanami smiled as best she could.
ありがとう、ナナミ。
Upon gazing at his expression, she saw that her other brother seemed a little embarrassed. And with that, relief washed over Nanami. before slowly putting her consciousness to rest. Nanami nearly collapsed, and I hurriedly went to catch her. She lost consciousness. Her face was pale, and she was clearly having trouble breathing.
早く病院に運ばないとこのままじゃ危ないわ
The hefty woman, who had introduced herself as Momose, peered at Nanami's face as she voiced her concern. Next, she turned to Shogun.
そっちに寝かせてる子もね
I decided to leave Nanami in Momose-san's care.
2人を頼みますあなたはどうするの探さなくちゃいけない人がいて
So I could learn the whereabouts of NoAH too. Whoops. I'd asked Nanami, since she had been taken there when she was kidnapped, but she wasn't too sure of it herself. In the end, I had no choice but to find Hatano.
必要なことなの。グラジオールを倒すために。
グラジオールか
You placed that with NoAH too, and
うんそうだよ
Ayase's expression stiffened. She took a single step toward me. By the way she slightly dragged her leg, I could tell she had genuinely been injured.
一緒に行くわ。私も。
その必要はないよ
I wonder if the whole 7 nights thing is a way to trick us and there's actually 8. It's just Ayase superimposing her own interpretation of things, but in reality there's more. Even though I tried to tell her no, she only shook her head in refusal.
一緒に集まらないと。
綾瀬もそれに岩も畑野っていう人を探してほしい
At the mere mention of her name, Yua jumped a little from her hiding spot behind Momose.
その人がノア2の場所知ってるから一緒に行動しなくても僕はみんなの見聞きしたことがわかるだから今は手分けして探して
That was the best option we had at the moment. We had to be quick about it. There was no guarantee we'd be safe if another earthquake struck.
わかった。
Ayase seemed to agree with me, though she didn't look all that happy about it.
なんだかよくわからないけど野呂瀬源一が全ての黒幕ですそういうことそれなら妹さんたちのことは私に任せなさいね
Momose-san puffed her chest out in a display of bravado, and then she gave me a quick nod, likely in an attempt to cheer me on.
ただし無茶しちゃダメよそれと一つ頼まれてほしいんだけどばんちゃんヘラヘラ笑ってるうさんくさそうな中年刑事を見たら私に連絡するように伝えてくれる
Yep, he saw that. Did she mean Bon Yasuji? I knew all about how he had died. He'd been shot and killed by his own partner. I had unconsciously seen it all unfold. I fully intended to tell Momose-san this, but...
まったくあの人はこんな時にどこをほっつき歩いてるんだかまあ案外どこかで怪我人を助けてるのかもしれないけどね
Momose had to go and say something like that. And now, I could no longer bring myself to tell her the truth.
というわけでよろしくはい
Without meaning to, I nodded, making a promise I'd never be able to keep. But it had been the only answer I could ever thought to make.
西条
With her head lowered, Yua spoke with a barely audible voice. For a good while now, she had been nervously taking peeks at me, which made me think she had something to say.
あなたのこと疑ってごめんなさい。私、西条くんを傷つけるようなこと言って。
The lenses of her glasses were covered in dust, and yet I knew very well that behind them, her eyes were wet with tears.
謝っても許してもらえるとは思ってないです。それでも謝らせてください。ごめんなさい。
She bowed her head deeply. I didn't reply. All I did was turn my back to her.
僕のベースにあるセーラのフィギュ
はい。
アよかったらもらってくれる？
Back when she deceived me, I couldn't have been more shocked. Now, I understood why she had done what she'd done. So it just felt wrong to say, I forgive you, or something along those lines. It was true that I had always thought of her as my enemy, but I had no right to make her bow to me, nor any right to forgive her.
いいんですか？
もらってほしい。
はい。また一緒にフィギュア買いに行きましょうね。
And with that, Yua put on the same gentle smile she'd had when we first met. I nodded to her in response. I exchanged looks with both Ayase and Momose-san. Then I etched the image of Nanami and Shogun into my eyes one last time. And so I began walking alone among the mountains of rubble once again. Whoosh! Whoosh. Shinsen Station of the Inokashira line was one stop from Shibuya, with it taking only a minute to arrive there by train. The station itself was situated within an underground tunnel, resulting in the only natural light being the beams seeping in from the opening at the end of the platform. Due to the earthquake, all of the lights had gone out, enveloping the area in a far thicker darkness than usual. Carefully supporting Orihara Kozue's body, Aoi Senna set foot onto the platform. There had been no need to buy a ticket. Not a single staff member was present in the vicinity, and none of the ticket machines were in service. Only a glance was necessary to understand how horribly warped the railway tracks had become. It was no wonder that the trains had suspended operation the day before. Kozue's left leg was drenched in blood. She had been deeply cut by broken glass during the earthquake. Senna had attempted to staunch the flow of blood with a towel, but the wound was far worse than she had supposed. Basic first aid would not suffice. Gigolomaniacs are unable to use their powers to heal wounds. To the brain, pain is an inescapable reminder of reality. Thus, gigolomaniacs cannot form any sort of mutual recognition to the effect of, I'm not wounded, or the injury didn't happen. Human instinct would never allow it. Even with Kozue's teary protests, Senna remained wordless. As she marched intently towards Shinsen Station, only one thing held her focus, something she refused to divert any attention from. When they at last reached the deserted platform, Senna quickly pulled back the arm she had been using to support Kozue. With no strength remaining in one of her legs, Kozue immediately collapsed to the ground. Kozue lifted her gaze in bewilderment, but Senna paid her no mind. Glaring motionlessly at a certain point in the distance, the black-haired girl gritted her teeth.
やった。見つけた。
at the end of her gaze. In the dark recesses of the platform sat a lone human figure.
セナさんのパパなのだ。
It was a homeless man clad in filthy rags. In his hands, he held a sign that read, "The hearts of the people face annihilation." Sena slowly approached the man.
誰に向けたメッセージだ。
Her voice was cold and unfeeling, a tone that could freeze all who came in contact with it.
負を生へと変換できる者たちへの遺言だよ。
Oh yeah, we know what that means by now. I don't know why I never realized change negative to positive was just antimatter to matter.
セナ、
Keeping his head hung low, the homeless man did not even look his daughter in the eye as he dispassionately spoke her name.
お前に慣れ慣れしく名前を呼ばれたくない。この半年、ずっと考えてきた。お前をどうやって殺すか。
ありがと
どうして礼を言う。
う。利己的な理由だよ。お前に殺されることが私にとって最善の贖罪かもしれない。そう思ったからだ。
それなら話は早い。
Senna reel-booted her D-sword. The method she had chosen for her father's execution was death by her D-sword. The simplicity behind it laid the truth bare. The way she killed him did not matter. All that mattered was killing him at all.
すまない。
Hatano still refused to raise his head.
どうして謝る。
お前に父殺しの汚名を着せてしまうからだ。
殺せさえすれば、どんな恥ずかしめだって受けてやる。お前は母さんと妹を殺した。
事実だ。
しかもあんなむごい最後。
Senna could only act calm and collected for so long. As her emotions began to take control, she was seized by a fierce tremble.
お前には見せたくはなかった。いや、今のは聞き流してくれ。
なぜあんなことを。
過程を説明することは無意味だよ。お前は納得しないし、結果が改変されるわけでもない。
Senna thrust the tip of her D-sword toward Hatano's head.
そうやってまた逃げるのか。
間違っていたのは私だ。それが全てなんだ。
お前には失望した。
まだ期待していたのか。何を。人を含めて世界は全て電気仕掛け。そう言ったのはお前だ、セナ。
Senna's shoulders trembled. For nearly 3 years, ever since Hatano had begun the Mana project, the two of them had rarely come into contact. And yet, despite the significant time apart, Hatano had seen right through her, something which troubled her to no end. Distraught by the sheer discomfort she felt, the wavering of her heart morphed into nothing but pure fury, dispelling any form of reason she still had within her.
セナ、惑わされるな。電気仕掛けならば、お前のその私を恨む感情もまた、ただの電気信号でしかない。
Hatano is just trying to overwhelm me. That was what Senna had told herself. Calm down.
お前の言葉なんか無効だ。
あまり感情的な行動をとるな。でなければ、お前は矛盾する。その言葉を受け取ってはいけない。精神攻撃だ。 判断を中止するんだ。
話を終わりだ。
Senna tried to take a stance with her D-sword. But before she could do it, Hatano suddenly stood up. Kozue watched their exchange with unease, and when she wondered if she should interfere, the pain in her leg forced her to abandon all hope of doing so. She was not sad, but that did not stop her from weeping deep and within herself. Hatano took one large step forward. Her response delayed. Senna switched to an offensive position, but in her attempt to brace herself, her feet slipped on the gravel. As her body shook and staggered, her stance began to collapse. Any sort of edge her appearance had once held disappeared, and in its place came a great fear. Her hatred toward her father was what had given her the strength to persist. But now that the time had come to face him at last, she found herself deeply afraid. She did not quite understand why that was. All she knew was that the cause lay within the words he had just spoken. Hatano threw himself at her with tremendous speed. As she fell backward, ignoring both gravity and centrifugal force alike, she swung her enormous D-sword up from below. The blade first carved out the tile of the platform floor, and then it slashed straight through her father's shoulder, and moved with a fluidity akin to a hot knife through butter. 1,000-degree knife challenge. 1,000-degree D-sword challenge. Her father's hand sent her flying backward. Fresh blood burst from her father's injury. His eyes were colored with an expression of deep relief. Senna's teeth sank into her lip. Not even a second later, something pierced her father's chest at lightning speed. Suwa. Tearing in through his back, it flew straight through the man's chest, very narrowly grazed Senna, then swiftly disappeared. So he was trying to protect her. Now, blood gushed not just from his shoulder, but from his chest as well. The crimson liquid flowing from his wounds splattered against Senna's cheeks. A bullet! Having been thrown backward, the moment Senna landed on her rear, her head shot right back up, and she frantically searched for the shooter. Hi there, you bastard! A man stood in the crossway between the Shinsen Station tunnel and the tunnel leading to Shibuya Station, the sole place illuminated by a gaping patch of sky above. He was holding a handgun. Senna's father collapsed beside her. Half of his body was already soaked in blood. No, were you protecting me? Overcome with disbelief, Senna fixed her gaze on the pool of blood spilling over the tiled floor. Gasping for air, her father weakly spoke. Oops. The bullet had been meant for Senna, but Hatano had taken it in her place. She'd been trying to take her father's life, but he had given it for her instead. Senna tightened her grip on the D-sword she held in her hand.
旗の親子にはどっちも死んでもらうつもりだったので。
An odd noise echoed throughout the platform, a sound Senna instantly recognized as a NoAH 2 terminal. How long has that sound been going on for? Senna would not let it continue. The existence of the man who had stepped between her and her father, the man whose gun had prematurely ended their resolution, was something she would not let continue.
よくも邪魔を。
When she stood up and fixed her eyes ahead, the cries of an infant began to resound throughout the dimly lit platform. A sense of strange discomfort grew in her hands, and for some reason she could not comprehend. Instead of a sword, she was clutching a decayed, desiccated baby. In an action motivated by reflex, she cast it away from her. But immediately after she had done so, she realized the child was her own sister. Her sister, whom she had only seen once long ago. Her sister, whose name she did not know, and whose own mother had devoured her until hardly anything remained. That was the child before her. Large avulsions where chunks of meat had been bitten free covered her entire frame. Each tear in her dry skin provided a window to few glistening fragments of light bone. Pink scraps of flesh adhered to them. Senna began to trample once more. She could not take her eyes off of it. She could not forgive herself for feeling disgust at her own sister, let alone tossing her aside like filth. It was exactly like back then. She had seen her mother's last moments. Her mother, who had died while ruled completely by madness. Still nestled within her mother's arms, her sister had been shredded to pieces and consumed, left only as a heap of pitiful remains. In response to the sight that she had been forced to witness, rather than sadness or horror, which she had felt, was pure, utter revulsion. Remnants of guilt remained lodged deep within her chest. Despising her father was her way of averting her eyes from that emotion.
私。
Even though a part of her very much knew that this was an attack brought on by a delusion, it reawakened feelings that had been sealed deep within her heart, leaving her entirely emotionless. It was as if her wrists and ankles were bound. But Senna was not the only one suffering from such a state. CoZ was as well. An enormous mirror had materialized in front of the collapsed girl, and within it, a reflection of her with her legs covered in blood asked her a simple question.
お前は誰?
CoZ froze in terror. Large tears began to flow from her eyes. The wound she wanted to forget, the past she never wanted to remember. Tears of a deep decay began leaking from her heart and mind. She wanted to run away as far as her legs could take her. Desiring nothing more than to look away from the mirror, she wished to turn away. Yet, forgoing her will entirely, her body refused to move. Herself on the other side of the mirror was not shedding even a single tear.
お前は誰? 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 私は誰? 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 私は誰?
She was collapsing into Gestaltzerfall. Gestaltzerfall, Loss of axiomaticity. Deterioration of cognitive ability. A concept in psychology, with Gestalt being the German word for form. The human brain perceives without question what it visually sees as A, based on the environment, circumstances, and knowledge gained through experience. However, when A's identity is rejected for some reason or another, the obvious becomes no longer obvious, and one will fall victim to a state in which they can see A, but are no longer able to perceive it as A. Just like when she had lost all words so long ago. Just like when her heart and mind had been broken so long ago. No longer able to see herself, she herself questioned herself in the mirror. She lacked any certainty that it was her own voice. She lacked any certainty that it was her own hairstyle. She lacked any certainty that it was her own nose. She lacked any certainty that it was her own pair of eyes. She lacked any certainty that it was the fullness of her own lips. She lacked any certainty that it was her own shape. She lacked any certainty that it was her own face.
私は誰？
君はコズピーだよ。
Her shape in the mirror had been on the cusp of dividing infinitely, but the voice that had suddenly burst into her mind had put a stop to it.
私はコズピー。私はコズピー。
She reconfirmed her identity. CoZ had returned to herself. Cracks ripped through the enormous mirror before her, and then it shattered into pieces. CoZ searched for the voice of her savior. When her gaze arrived at the ticket gate, she recognized exactly who it was. Her real voice, the one that would have been lost forever, called out to him. CoZ called out, not with her inner voice, but with her real voice. I realized that it was the first time I'd ever heard CoZ called out, not with her inner voice, but with her real voice. I realized that it was the first time I'd ever heard her use it. It was thanks to CoZ that I'd managed to get over here so quickly. I'd been next to a police box at the top of Dogonzaka when I'd heard her inner voice screaming for help. Running toward that voice had brought me here, and when I got here, I saw Senna and CoZ, faces pale from being shown a delusion I couldn't see, and Hatano-san, collapsed and covered in blood. I'd found them, but I was too late.
こいつはラッキーっすね。
Hi there, you bastard, you son of a bitch. A man with a gun in his hand was standing at the crossing. He twirled and twirled it around his fingers as if he were some sort of gunslinger. Contrasting heavily with the suit he was wearing, he had a rucksack on his back. A harsh mechanical noise was emanating from it. Suwa Mamoru, a detective from the Tokyo MPD's 1st Investigative Division. This wasn't the first time I'd run into him. And I knew exactly what he'd done.
もともとは目障りな畑の親子を処分しに来たんすけどね。西条くん、君が自分から火に飛び込んできてくれて感謝感激っす。君を見かけたら捕まえろってことになってるんすよ。
誰に？
内緒っす。
You smiled a flippant smile, one that was somewhat reminiscent of Detective Bond's. But there was one key difference. Detective Bond's smile had always been just an act meant to throw people off and rile them up. When it came to Suwa, however, the sly smile was who he truly was.
あんたはノロセの居場所を知ってる？
西条くんさ。
Suwa heaved a sigh, shaking his head in an extremely exaggerated motion.
口の聞き方に気をつけてほしいっすね。自分の方が年上っすよ。
バンっていう人を殺したのはあんただ。
だから
刑事のくせに人を殺すなんて。
君には言われたくないっす。
I gripped my D sword tightly.
あんたみたいなやつに敬語を使う義理なんてないよ。
そんな舐めた口聞いていいんすか？殺すぞ、童貞野郎。
Yikes. Well, guess that's who he really is. Even from this distance, it was clear to see. The smile on Suwa's face had disappeared. Without moving from where he was, he gestured with his free hand like he was trying to shake something off. Man's got eyes split apart like a goldfish. An impact, followed by pain. It was an all too abrupt sensation. When I looked at my shoulder in surprise, I saw a familiar-looking cross pierced into it. No, it was no cross. It was a stake. So was he the crucifixion killer? A cross-shaped stake from the crucifixion case. Or maybe he just had it because he's with the police. It had come at me too fast to see. The area was so dark, I hadn't even realized it was flying toward me until it had already hit me. Suwa had thrown it. Without moving from his spot, he'd thrown it from that distance with pinpoint accuracy. Oh, now I think about it, he's the guy who arrested Komaeda. And, well, I mean, we saw him in the image, so, like, very possible that he just set the guy up with fake evidence and then used... Or he maybe just forced a confession out of him. I cautiously touched the stake. It felt cold and smooth. Was it a delusion? Or was it real? The pain was growing more and more intense. I couldn't put any strength into my hand. I was unable to hold on to my D-sword anymore. Yep, guess it's him. Suwa raised his voice in an attempt to suppress his rage. Whoosh. Whoosh. Not even a moment later, Suwa was holding even more cross-shaped stakes in his hand. Doing his best to restrain his furious rage that was on the verge of pouring out, he fired off the additional stakes toward Nishijo Takumi. They disregarded all form of drag and the laws of physics altogether. As if they possessed wills of their own, they sped intently toward Takumi's arms. 15 had found their mark thus far. Not a single one had missed. They had assaulted Takumi's shoulders, upper arms, wrists, palms, hips, thighs, knees, and shins. Blood spilled from every one of his deeply carved wounds. Suwa already had another stake in his hand. And once again, he fired it off just like the others.
自分が万能の神になったような気がするんだ。
I felt an incredibly strange sensation. He's probably not even listening to me anyway, Sua thought to himself. Sua hurled yet another stake toward Takumi, who hung his head at the mercy of his attacker. Each and every wound carved into my body only made me feel more alive.
俺はただの人
Even
間だけどな。
old guy like
お
me
前ら
can
と
wrestle
同等の力を手に
power
入れ
you. Gods. All of it can be attributed to the rucksack the man was wearing on his back, a bag housing a NoAH 2 terminal within it. With that, he can enjoy NoAH 2's power even at a distance. He would become an artificial gigolomaniac. Sua found himself wholly bewitched by its power. He was among the fanatics, vanguards, who would commit the dirtiest of deeds in the name of the founder and his teachings.
この力は神からの贈り物だ。信仰のため、信じる者のために戦えるんだから。
Sua hurled yet another stake. Penetrated the nape of my Takumi's neck. I was racked with extreme pain that felt as if my entire body was being torn in two. Pain so horrible, I felt as if I might go insane. The boiling, ruthless bloodlust simmering in Sua's heart demanded to know just how much pain the boy could endure. Springing forth from the torture taking place, death began to rear its head. He would make death rear its head in him. I was unable to resist. While I still managed to put enough force into my legs to stop myself from falling over, Takumi was unable to resist, and while he still managed to avoid falling over, none of that could prevent the hail of stakes coming at him. My chest, Takumi's, his stomach, his toes, his entire body. With no mercy in sight, stakes both thick and sharp were continually pounded into me.
虫ピンで標本にされた昆虫みたいだな。しかもカブトムシとか蝶とかじゃない。お前みたいなガキにはコガネムシあたりがお似合いだ。
Takumi couldn't stand for another second. Willpower alone was all that kept me from collapsing. Sua was baffled at what could possibly be keeping him from collapsing. But I was almost at my limit. But he knew the boy was almost at his limit. My field of vision was becoming pixelated. It was hard to see anymore. With eyes as empty as those, he likely could not see anymore.
遺言があるならいいな。ただし20時以内だ。
Tightly clutching the next stake, Sua was talking to me as if he had already won. Tightly clutching the next stake to a neck. The next would kill me. Him.
さっき童貞やろうって言った。
傷ついたのか。
Using his voice in the distance as a guide, I glared in Sua's direction. Though the light in Takumi's eyes was soon to die, he glared in Sua's direction all the same.
これが最後の一本。 信仰の救いはお前にはやらねえよ。
I could sense the air tearing around the stake that Sua had hurled. Sua hurled the stake he had been holding.
知ってる。
The stake would serve as the cross, the messenger bringing both certain death and the promised gospel. Damn! Death would come to whoever it struck.
童貞の妄想力はすごいんだ。
A dull thud resounded. The stake had deeply penetrated his forehead. An incredible burst of pain exploded within Sua, gushing forth from every part of his body. I see, that was what was going on. He was slowly swapping places with him. As if it had been entirely an illusion, the intense pain that had consumed every part of my entire body immediately disappeared. Sua let out a mute scream, writhing in agony. I let out a deep breath that slowly licked my dry lips. An array of cross-shaped stakes penetrated Sua's entire body. There was a single cross-shaped stake in my hand. When he looked upward, he saw the cross-shaped stake embedded in his forehead. When I looked upward, I saw the overcast, gloomy sky above.
復活の奇跡は物語で妄想なんだ。何をした妄想シンクロ。
Yep. Assimilation unto a delusion, erosion unto the mind. He did what Sua did to him during the crucifixion murder, I assume. Like two ripples negating one another, like two wavelengths resounding with one another, entangling, melting together. A fate which is distorted, created by one, created by another, switching them out in. There's no way that's possible, Sua thought to himself. Sua's expression laid his thoughts bare.
神の先兵ならメシアと同じように朽ち果てろ。
Messiah, from the Hebrew word Messiah, meaning the one anointed with oil. In Judaism and Christianity, the Messiah is the one who shall bring peace to the world. In Christianity, Jesus Christ is considered to have been the Messiah. Takumi tossed the stake away. I tossed the stake away. Color was quickly fading from Sua's field of vision. Light was quickly fading from Sua's eyes.
それと僕は救いなんかいらないよ。
Sua can no longer reply. Without falling to the ground, he breathed his final breath. I made my way back into the station. Damn, Takumi. Actually did something badass for once. Damn. Boy's got a kill count now. Kozupi's eyes were wide, and her mouth hung open. She was completely stunned. Seeing all that must have really surprised her. Her leg was covered in so much blood, it was hard to look at.
コズピ大丈夫？
Without getting up from the ground, she nodded. It looked like she was able to stand on her own. Her shimmering eyes looked up at me. You know, last person I ever thought was going to kill Sua was Takumi.
たくみさん、今何が起きたの？
Kazubi, you're talking out loud.
あ、本当だ。
Putting a finger to her lip, she tilted her head in surprise, but she seemed to forget about it pretty quickly after that.
童貞さんの妄想力はすごいの？
すごいよ。
Senna once told me ignorance was a sin, but I don't quite agree with that. Not knowing things goes hand in hand with delusions. The less you know, the more your delusions can grow and surge, to the point of infinity, really. Therefore, if you already know and have experienced everything, there'd be nothing left to fantasize about. And if there's one thing virgins definitely lack, it's experience. So it only makes sense that their delusions are the best around. Speaking of Senna, where was she? I searched the dimly lit platform for her. She was standing at the edge of the platform, hanging her head, and at her feet
畑野さん。
was Hatano Issei, lying in a pool of his own blood. He showed no signs of moving, leaving me to realize he was already dead. I was too late. If anyone was nowhere where to find Noah too, it would have been him.
ノア2は渋谷駅のすぐ横にある。
As if she'd read my mind, with her eyes still aiming down at Hatano-san, at the corpse of her dead father, Senna began to murmur something.
この男が死ぬ間際に私の心に伝えてきた。渋谷駅の東口、ビルの屋上にある。今は閉鎖されたプラネタリウム。そこにノア2がある。
どう思う？
I wasn't sure if I should have said something to her or just stayed silent. She hated her father, enough to want him dead. And even though her wish had come true, from where I stood, she looked miserable as could be.
くそ。私をかばって。それで罪を償ったつもりか。
Her words were targeted at her father's lifeless corpse, but he said nothing in return, and he never would again.
お前は自分の罪を認めた。その上で私に見せつけるように自殺したようなものだ。許せない。私はお前を許さない。
セナさん、心が泣いてるの。本当はお父さん殺したくなかったのら。
It was just as CoZ said, and with those words, Senna's usual resolute demeanor disappeared. Her shoulders trembled. Heartbroken, she fell to her knees.
どうして生きて罪を償おうとしないんだ。どうして私を一人にするんだ。どうして。
セナ。
西条、お願い。
Senna raised her head. The teary expression on her face now was nothing like the stern one she always wore.
壊して。
Suffering from a terrible grief, she spoke with the fragility of a girl who had just lost the only family she had left.
僕を殺そうとしたくせに君のお願いなんて聞く義理はないよ。
匠さん。
Turning my back towards Senna and CoZ, I began the march down the tunnel to Shibuya Station. Before me were two giant gaping holes, A deep darkness stretched deep inside both of them. Passing through them would be the quickest way to get to Shibuya Station.
僕は僕の目的のためだけにノア2を壊す。絶対に。
I had a feeling Senna said something after that, but I wasn't listening anymore. A single colossal device held the attention of two men, Inohana CoZ, a member of the House of Representatives, and Kuromochi Yuudai, the founder of the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light. An ominous hum continually sounded from the device, from NoAH 2, beckoning a nod of satisfaction from the both of them.
5000人を殺すと言い出した時はどうなることかと思ったが、
調整には随分と骨が折れたよ。特に300人委員会に感づかれないようにするのはね。
ご協力に感謝します。
Norose gave a very slight bow.
だがこれが完成した今、5000人などちっぽけな数字でしかなくなった。
早くも影響が目に見えて出てきているよ。人々の家畜化が始まっている。
これでいよいよ我らが世界を手に入れる日も現実のものとなったわけだ。
Inohana and Kuromochi looked to one another, exchanging sinister smirks. Norose, meanwhile, simply gazed at them, his face not even so much as twitching. You guys realize he's gonna kill you both, right?
しかしノロセよ、貴様なかなか興味深い趣味を持っているようじゃないか。
何のことでしょう。
Inohana smiled crudely, then gestured with his head toward the tableau erected near NoAH 2.
なんとも芸術性にあふれるオブジェだ。ぜひわしにも一つ用意してもらいたいものだな。
素材ならば我が教団の信者の中からえりすぐりを提供してもよい。
倉持先生は気前がいい。
あれは餌ですよ。
餌？
ノア2をより完璧なものにするための。
まあそういうことにしておこう。
それよりノア2が具体的にどれほどのことができるのか実演してもらいたいところだね。
もうそれはいい。早速やってみせたまえ。
Norose lightly shrugged his shoulders, his impassive facial expression remaining ever present.
ではこのようなものはどうですか。
By the time his words reached their conclusion, the demonstration had already begun. In the blink of an eye, Inohana and Kuromochi came to realize that they were both holding handguns. Neither NoAH 2 nor Norose had made a single movement, and yet this miraculous happening had become undeniable reality.
おお、本物そっくりだ。
まるで手品のようだよ。
He's gonna make them shoot each other.
手品と一緒にしてもらっては困ります。その銃の存在は現実。
Their eyes fixated on the handguns within their grasps. Inohana and Kuromochi nodded in satisfaction for a second time.
実に素晴らしい。
いかにも神をも超越する力だ。
この銃は記念にもらっておくとするか。
小物ですね。
To the other two men present in the room, Norose's faint whisper was inaudible.
早速今後の計画を検討しよ
まずは300人委員会の排除。
う。ノロセ、ご苦労だったな。
今後のことは追って連絡する。
The two were thoroughly pleased with themselves and the project, and moved to leave the premises with buoyant steps. And yet,
その必要はありません。
何？
どういうことだ。
Norose's expression found itself changing for the first time. He narrowed his eyes, slightly raised his jaw, and stared at them from where he stood. His attitude was one of intense scorn, as if he were fiercely looking down on them. No, in truth, he was looking down on them.
計画は私が引き継ぎましょう。ただし、あなた方の考えているような低俗な目的ではなく、より崇高な理由のためにです。
Norosei's tone remained civil and polite. Beginning to understand what exactly he was conveying, the two men naturally became infuriated.
貴様、裏切るのか。
神にでもなったつもりかね。
300人委員会が黙ってはおらんぞ。
お二人も300人委員会のメンバーでありながら反旗を翻そうとしていたではありませんか。
Norosei's eyes watched them carefully, and housed within them was raw, unending contempt. His gaze was as cold as could be. It was as if he was being forced to study two monoliths of pure rot and filth. His gaze conveyed a very particular meaning, one that revealed he had only been using these two from the very start.
これは全て予定通りの行動ですよ。あなた方がここで死ぬことも含めて。
ふざけるな。
ざれ言を。
Kuromochi and Ninohana aimed their guns at Norosei. They moved to pull the triggers.
ざれ言ではなく。
The two guns fired simultaneously. Their roars echoed within the dome.
予知だったのですが。
And yet, it was not Norosei who had fallen, but Inohana and Kuromochi. For some unfathomable reason, they had taken their sights off of Norosei right before pulling the triggers, and shot each other instead. Their deaths had been instant. The two compatriots then collapsed. They had put holes into each other's heads, and now they were nothing more than lumps of meat who would never draw breath again.
NoAHは我が手にあります。俗物にはその意味がお分かりにはならなかったようだ。
Norosei's demonstration had been about more than simply showing off guns. Its purpose had been to make the two men mistake each other for Norosei and take their own lives in the process. That was the real demonstration, and with the power of NoAH too, it had been beyond trivial to perform. Next, Norosei turned toward his tableau. Affixed there was the figure of Sakihata Arimi. She had begged Norosei to let Nanami go, and thus she had been taken hostage in her place. Due possibly to the mental attacks by Nanami, Rimi's energy had long since faded, leaving her head pointed toward the ground as she hung affixed. Yet, when Norosei strode toward her, her shoulders ever so slightly trembled.
自分の手を汚さずに卑怯なことばっかり。あなたこそ俗物だよ。
The back of Norosei's hand struck her cheek. Following this, he grabbed Rimi by the jaw and forced her to look at him. Even though nearly all life had left her expression, even as she desperately fought to keep her eyes open, her glare flared with an ardent blaze directed solely at Norosei.
なぜ西条匠に助けを求めないのです？
Norosei whispered close to her ear.
彼を巻き込まないで。
どちらの彼のことを言っているのですか？
二人とも。
私としてはどちらか一人で十分ですがね。IR2 を生み出したものとその完全なるコピー。二人とも化け物じみた力を持っている。彼らどちらかのコードサンプルが手に入ればノア2はより完璧へと近づくでしょう。 神をも超える力を得るのです。
Rimi lowered her eyes in anguish. He fiercely tore away the hand that had been holding her jaw, and as his gaze rose up to Noah too, a smile formed from the corners of his mouth.
さあ、呼びかけなさい。どちらでもいい。私は歓迎しますよ。
Rather, that was exactly what he had been waiting for. After surmounting all of Norose's trials devised specifically for him, Nishijo Takumi would arrive in this very location. As I made my way through the dark tunnel, I relied on the red glow of my D-sword to see. My steps naturally became quicker and quicker. I never walked on the subway tracks at all before. As certain as I was that no trains were coming, the mere possibility had me tense enough that I couldn't keep my head from frantically whipping back and forth. It was a minute-long train ride between Shibuya Station and Shinsen Station. The distance between should have been less than a kilometer. Luckily for me, the tunnel in the Inokashira line didn't have too many cave-ins, so making it to Shibuya Station shouldn't have been the worst thing ever. But something was still weighing on me. CoZ had warned me about something before we'd parted ways.
たくさんのグモグモドロドロっていう意識がね、待ち構えてるのら。CoZ、力になれないけど、気をつけてね、たくみさん。
Oopy goopy, loopy head consciousnesses. Right. At the very least, I imagined I wasn't gonna like those. I was starting to have second thoughts. Fear crept up on me, and I started to feel incredibly alone. Making my way through a pitch-black tunnel all by myself. A tunnel in which something horrifying was apparently waiting for me. How could I not lose my nerve? Whispers in the back of my mind urged me to leave the tunnel this instant, to find a way to Shibuya Station on the surface. But I didn't have that kind of time to lose. So, in order to destroy any remaining fear I had, I thought of Rimi's smiling face. I thrusted my D-sword forward to illuminate the tunnel ahead. Problem was, its red glow only made my feelings of anxiety and foreboding even worse. Suddenly, something felt off. I felt like I'd caught a glimpse of something strange. Strange enough to make my gaze dart all around to try and find it. 10 meters ahead of me on the track, a small shadow was jutting out, one that hadn't been there a second ago. I squinted. Actually, it wasn't a shadow at all. Standing at about 20 centimeters tall, it was a Seraton figure. What the? Why would that be in a place like this? I was hit with a sense of whiplash. It was way too out of place. I was in a dim underground tunnel, one for train tracks that took people between stations. The general public didn't tend to go into the tunnels themselves, especially this deep. I was right in the center of them. And yet, the figure was there anyway. And it was the post-awakening version too, my absolute favorite. Their chest was pretty busted up, pun intended. Wait a second. Was that my figure? The one I dropped during the chaos at Scramble Crossing yesterday? If it was, then how the hell had she ended up here? She was standing perfectly upright too, with that bewitching smile of hers aimed straight at me.
なんでセイラが
タッキーにはそう見えてるんだ。
Time to finally put this lady in her place. As a non-existent person. I heard a voice. The voice I always deluded was talking inside my head. Sarah's voice.
なんでもいいけどさ。
It happened in less than a second, faster than I could even blink. Seraton, who should have just been a small figure, had instantly transformed into a life-sized model. Then, her smooth, silky, sexy body began to bend and twist just like a real person's. Her hair rustled around, her huge tits jiggled. Was this a delusion?
ねえタッキー、遊ぼうよ。
I heard another voice behind me. Whipping my head around in shock, I saw another life-size Seraton standing there.
リミッチのことなんてほっといてさ。
But it didn't end there. To my left and to my right, the amounts of Seratons were slowly multiplying. They cascaded out from the darkness. Just the sight alone sent a chill down my spine. The number of Seratons had to have been at least in the triple digits now.
A flood. The boss fight against the Seraton amalgamation begins.
100 Seratons crowded around me and spoke in unison.
いっしょボケナス。
Laughing gleefully, one of the Seratons in front of me charged at me. Then, her slender arms swung her colossal metal bat. The impact was definitely real. My D-sword managed to take the brunt of the blow. It had been way too heavy of a strike. My hand started spasming before going numb. It all hurt like hell. That was when I realized it was all really happening. It wasn't just some delusion. It was reality. They were real-booted beings. And every single one of them was out for blood.
遊んでくれないとぶっ飛ばしちゃうぞ。
僕の嫁なら道を開けて。
やだ。
それなら
I'd have to brute force my way through. I re-tightened my grip on my D-sword. The fiery emblem of my D-sword's hilt began to burn. Even more red light began to emanate from the blade. I slashed the sword, tearing right through my waifu. The blade was weightless, smooth in how it handled. It drew whatever trajectory I wished it to. The blade bit into her shoulder before running through her body in its entirety. There had not been a shred of resistance when it came to rending her flesh and bones. It had hardly taken any strength from me at all. Sarah's glamorous body split in half at an angle. As her entrails piled out, she collapsed on the spot. Even her organs had been perfectly reproduced. They glittered and shone with a pink gleam. I averted my eyes.
So this is what it takes to get over your waifu, huh?
ごめんセラ。
I was gutting my favorite character with my own two hands. As an otaku, this was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. But still, I couldn't give up here.
強い強い。
He's got a way superior pink-haired waifu waiting for him.
さすがタッキー。
A way superior pink-haired waifu with a giant anime weapon.
そんなタッキーが好き。もっと気持ちよくして。遊ぼうよ。めちゃくちゃにしてあげる。
I love how this one's just so much lower res than the other for some reason.
楽しい楽しい。
Suddenly, each and every one of the Seras started speaking independently of one another. The flood of voices threatened to swallow me whole. I have to quit thinking of them as Sera. That was what I had to tell myself. And so, in order to keep moving forward, I swung my sword at the Seras blocking my path.
どいてよ。
rending the darkness with a single horizontal strike. A red beam blazed across the tunnel. The four Seratons standing next to each other instantly turned into corpses. Someone's gonna have to clean this up. Another one grabbed me from behind. She wrapped her arms around my neck in a chokehold. Her large, supple boobs pressed against my back. Another Sarah tried to mount my leg, and I quickly punctured her in the face with my D-sword. Damn. A cleanly cut molten hole formed where her smile had used to be. It was hard to breathe. My neck was being constricted. It was on the verge of suffocating. Another metal bat was coming right at me. I managed to writhe around enough to change positions, and now my back was facing it. I felt Sarah's body shudder, and her grip on my neck weakened. I shook her off my back. Then I whipped around and swiped with my D-sword. 3 pairs of Seraton's legs came at me. My next strike would sever them at the thighs. The 3 of them plunged into the ground in perfect harmony. I stepped on top of their backs. When the person wanting to be stepped on does the stepping. Sarah started winding up her metal bat, and I swung my sword down on her. Her metal bat met with my D-sword, only for me to carve straight through it, straight through the top of her head. No, my D-sword wasn't carving things. More than that, it would have been more accurate to say it evaporated anything that crossed with its trajectory. No matter how soft the object, no matter how solid the object, no matter how cold the object, no matter how hot the object, my blade instantaneously boiled and burned away anything it came into contact with, severing it from its source. These anime characters, who all had the same base, who were all calling my name in unison, who continued to attack me just for the sake of it. It made my hair stand on end. To try and rile myself up, I let out a huge scream. Then, aiming for the Sarah right in front of me, I plunged my sword straight into her chest. Sarah grabbed onto my D-sword. At almost that exact same second, her hands evaporated. I lost all words. Dread began to climb up from the depths of my body. Chills ran down my back. My entire body stiffened. This wasn't Sarah. Sarah would never have turned against me. I heard the sound of several of my ribs being pulverized. I even felt the bones in my right arm creak, letting out a dull sound as they did. The blow resounded within my body, and then the sheer impact sent me flying. I smashed into a wall. My head collided directly with it. My vision warped and wavered. She rapidly swung her metal bat down on top of me. I was getting bludgeoned. My left arm was minced from the elbow down. Even the concrete in the wall was dented from the blow. Another metal bat swung straight into my leg. All strength left my right hand. The slightest movement caused a severe pain to scream out in my brain. But I ignored it, and I swung my D-sword. I cleanly severed the oncoming metal bat, but the pain of doing so forced a groan from my mouth. Gotta get ourselves Chaos Warriors. Fight mobs of Ceratons. I came within arm's reach of the Sarah in front of me, impaled her torso with my D-sword, and tore my way through her. Her blood spattered my hands. Despite being just an anime character, her blood was incredibly warm. My mind went numb. Pain was all that ruled me now. I wanted to lock it all away, but I couldn't. As long as this pain endured, I would never be able to. Copious amounts of clotted blood gushed out of my flattened left hand. It wasn't easy trying to hold on to the D-sword in my right either. The pain seemed to reverberate from my very bones. Pain so bad, I felt like I was about to pass out. I realized my entire body was soaked with sweat. The droplets stung at my eyes. My vision was hazy. More and more Ceratons approached from in front of me. The sound of their cheerful laughter reverberated deep within my ears, making my very eardrums vibrate. With my injuries, I doubted I'd live for more than a few hours. I thought it'd suddenly come to me. But it didn't really matter. I was just a delusion anyway. A being that would blink out of existence just as quickly as it blinked in. In the grand scheme of things, my injuries didn't really matter. I just needed to save Rini. I just needed to destroy NoAH too. If this body could grant that, then I'd gladly give it all away. So... Her metal bat came down on me again. I figured I'd be able to avoid it. But the fatigue and pain slowed my reaction considerably. I was struck right in the temple. I could feel its enormous spikes tearing into my skull. The world shook. My vision went black. Things became even darker than they already had, and I could no longer see anything at all. I tumbled over, and as I tumbled, my mind went to my right hand. It was exploding with pain, but I was able to reaffirm that my D-sword was still there. I swung out my flattened left hand in an attempt to regain my footing. An exposed bone collided with the ground. An impact akin to an electric shock ran through my entire body, causing me to black out for a second, but I regained consciousness soon after. My vision came back. I started to raise back up. The soles of my feet caught hold of the ground. Using the centrifugal force I'd been blown away with, I charged into the horde of Ceros and swung my right hand. My bones creaked. Freshly spilled blood burst out from the Ceros. The stench of blood refused to leave my nostrils. Was it my blood? Sarah's blood? Who even knew? It all blended together. All I knew was that I was covered in blood, and that the coat of red staining me had made my vision go blurry. I kept on carving into them. Who even knew just how many I'd cut down at this point? When would it end? In my mind, it was as if she was multiplying infinitely. Sarah clung to my right hand. I swung both her and my D-sword around. But she wouldn't let go. Instead, she bent my arm backward in a way it wasn't meant to go. My joint came out of its socket, while strength left my arm. My D-sword hit the ground. Nausea welled up in my stomach. I coughed and sputtered violently. The taste of blood spread through my mouth. I was pretty sure my shattered ribs were puncturing my internal organs. Any and every kind of pain was eating away at my body. It felt like I was going to go insane. But I was holding out hope. I couldn't help but hold out hope. I wanted to be set free. But I knew very well how impossible that was. So my hope was more wishful thinking than anything.
汗拭いてあげよっか。
With a big grin on her face, Sarah peered at my face, and I drove my foot into her jaw as hard as I could. I forcibly channeled more strength into my right arm, while sensation in it was going numb. It felt as if my nerves were burning to a crisp. My entire body was boiling. And now, the pain in my bones was rippling not just through my arm, but through my entire body. I was on the verge of shattering to pieces. Then I heard something that sounded like the growl of a beast. For a moment, I wondered whose voice it was, only to realize it was my own. The fingers on my right hand faintly shifted. I grabbed my D-sword and conjured a delusion. I pictured it being bound by a cord, and it instantly became real. The sword was secured to my hand with the cord. I needed to move to get to where Rimi was, beyond this darkness.
タッキー、どうして私と一緒にいてくれないの？
I sputtered out the blood that had gathered in my mouth. I was surrounded by heaps of Sarah corpses lying on the ground. Other Sarahs kicked past them on their way to me, producing ripples in a puddle of blood. I slowly shook my head.
だってセイラは
I gritted my teeth. You're a main character!
アニメじゃないか。
The very next second, every single Sarah morphed into 2D. The ones who were standing became life-sized cardboard cutouts. The corpses lying on the ground became covers for body pillows. They had all returned home, back to the realm of 2D. Not a single one of them moved anymore.
チリはチリに帰らなきゃ。
More like asses to asses, butts to butts.
僕も後で行くよ。
In something of a moment of silence for the girls, I briefly hung my head over the wreckage. In the back of my mind, I was thinking that the gory, blood-stained Sarah body pillow covers definitely wouldn't sell well. I was on the brink of passing out, but I managed to stave it off by biting my lip hard. And then I started walking through the dark tunnel once again. I ended up at a dilapidated building near Shibuya Station's east entrance. The surrounding scenery was dotted with partly or entirely collapsed buildings, leaving the building here as the sole intact survivor. On it was the dome of a rooftop planetarium that had closed down some years back. Oh yeah, I was thinking about it. I'm guessing that whoever was dressed as Darth Spider, for some reason they have a wheelchair and they're the person behind the group dive. I don't know who it is though. Wheezing my lungs out, I descended the deserted stairway to the top floor. I'd made my way through the unattended lobby into the planetarium before I took a breather at the gargantuan device that had jumped into my sight. It was NoAH in all its majesty, surrounded by a chilly air, robbing me of my warmth. A piece of art stood beside NoAH.
リミ
Rimi, affixed to the art piece, slowly raised her head at my voice. Our eyes met. Her eyes shot open.
どうして
君を助けに
Her eyes began to swim.
バカだよ。
She shook her head sadly.
そんなキスだらけになってそんな無茶して待っててって言ったのになんで
Because I've fallen in love with you. I'm in love with you, Rimi. But I couldn't say that out loud. I couldn't say anything heroic like, I'm here to save you because I'm in love with you. Not with how I was. Not with me covered in blood and a completely flattened arm. My current state was as far from Prince Charming as humanly possible. If I said something like that now, I'd probably look creepy as hell. That put me closer to being a stalker. That put me closer to a stalker than anything, really. If I spilled my guts to her in some speech that I didn't let her get a word in, it would have just put her way off. She was going to live, and I was going to die. Having some dead man walking convey all his feelings on a whim would have left a horrible taste in her mouth. So, I bottled it all in.
意味にこれを返したくて
My right hand was still weak. It was the hand I'd been using to hold my D-sword, desperately forcing my fingers to move. I reached inside my jacket and pulled out a handkerchief. It was colored a gentle vermilion. Whether that was its original hue or due to my blood staining it, I didn't know. Rimi had given it to me, though its floral aroma had long since expired. That handkerchief was one of several precious memories she'd given me.
僕は君をここから助け出してノア2を壊してこのハンカチを返すんだ
That was all I was capable of doing, and if I managed to achieve it all, I could die with no regrets. Besides, there wasn't much else I could do. In my mind, every sense of mine had gone numb a long time ago. I imagined that the reason for that was because the pain was so severe, my brain had no choice but to start blocking the sensations transmitted by whatever nerves were responsible. I could barely move. My arm continued to bleed. My vision was blurry. I was incredibly cold. I had a feeling that, if I wasn't careful, I'd lose consciousness right then and there.
君は実に勇敢ですね。
A towering man emerged from behind NoAH, Norosei Genichi. Facing me, he clapped sarcastically with no clear expression on his face.
しかし、
Oops.
致命的なことが一つあります。行動原理が感情に根ざしているということです。それは野蛮人のすることだ。
I had no idea what he was getting at. It took everything I had just to bear with the pain, So aside from Remy, I didn't have any brain power left to try and comprehend what anyone was saying. Let me guess, we're gonna fight whoever Takami's gonna have to fight whichever gigalomaniac Norose was talking to.
逃げて。
小を犠牲にして大の利益を守る。それを悪だと思いますか？私はそうは思いません。このままでは人類はいずれ滅び去る。人の欲望によってです。あまりにも醜い心、あまりに利己的な欲望の洪水。人の社会はすでに破綻し、腐り落ちようとしています。誰もが己のことしか考えず、その結果殺し合い、奪い合っています。君もギガロマニアックスとして覚醒したのなら見たはずですよ。人の心の本質を。私は幼い頃に覚醒したため、もう何十年という間、それを見てきた。300人委員会は人類の自滅を阻止するためという大義名分のもと、世界人間牧場計画を推し進めてきました。けれどそれも所詮、彼らのエゴを満たすものでしかない。私が目指すのはそんなものではありません。悟ったのですよ。この腐った世界を再生するためには、社会のシステムを変えるのではなく、世界中すべての人間の心を変える必要があるのだと。
Does he want to annihilate all of mankind and replace them with beings made from delusions?
そのためのプロジェクトノアです。ノア2があれば世界中すべての人間から負の妄想を消し去り、清廉な心へと漂白できます。争いは消え、世界に永遠の平和を与えることができます。
Or that, I guess. Yeah, that's simpler. Just, I thought maybe he was going more elitist.
君も誰かに蔑まれることもなくなるでしょう。
Finally, his novel-length monologue came to a close. My body was on the verge of collapse, but I desperately planted my feet. At least I'd gotten a bit of a break. That was the only reason I was still standing.
あんたの言ってることはもしかしたら正しいかもしれない。
I hadn't really been paying much attention, but in regards to the future of humanity, he was definitely right. His ideals were entirely righteous. He was the president of a sprawling corporation, and his eye was aimed solely on justice for the whole of mankind. Me, meanwhile, I was a monster, a virgin, an otaku freak, a selfish, ego-driven wannabe who just wanted to save some girl he liked and didn't give a shit about anyone else. Normally, that'd make me the bad guy through and through. The monster would then be slain, and justice would prevail.
でも僕はあんたには負けられない。
なぜ否定するのです？
ただの自己満足だ。
残念です。
His gaze locked onto me. Norose grabbed Remy by the collar and threw her off the art piece. His right hand then stretched out in front of it. Is it his D-sword? Yep! Holy crap. And in that ephemeral moment, the once standing art piece found itself in Norose's hand. It was no mere art piece, nor was it a cross that existed for crucifixion. It was a D-sword. It was far too monstrous to be called a sword. Savagery. gelidity, that which sowed terror, a contaminated gospel, chaos thoroughly complexified, a blasphemy with which to desecrate, the purest of evils, akin to the very gates of hell themselves. The hearts of those who gazed upon it would be wrenched away, luring them into an eternal eon of strife. All that was negative in this world converged into one, embodying its very shape. I gulped back all the saliva that had built up in my throat. Despite everything, I made up my mind. I fixed my grip on my D-sword, which was still bound to my hand with the cord, and then I took a single step toward NoAH 2. Or more accurately speaking, I began to close the distance between Norosei and myself. Speaking of distance, he had an overwhelming advantage in range over me.
剣で切り合うような野蛮な行為はあまり得意ではないのですが、しかし君からコードサンプルを手に入れる必要があります。そのために無力化しなければ。
Towering over me, with one hand, Norosei swung a D-sword even bigger than he was. His strike was so heavy, it felt as if it could have pulverized any known object out there. My arm was slow to respond. Even moving it slightly made pain explode throughout it. Even still, I forced it to do so and raised my arm. I caught the blow with my D-sword. Any normal sword would have been split right in two. And that wasn't even accounting for how unbelievably thin my sword was. It couldn't have been more different from Norosei's. And yet, my D-sword didn't break. Somehow, I managed to parry Norosei's first strike. My hand went numb. With my left hand pulverized, my balance on that side was non-existent. The stance I'd been holding collapsed. By the looks of it, he was about to send me flying. I just had to endure it. I connected with Norosei's second blow. His recovery between strikes was way too fast. Don't be misled by how his sword looks. That was what I told myself. It was a battle of strength between a sword that was far too thin and delicate and a sword that was far too colossal and ferocious. Somehow, I was holding out with it, at least for the moment. Damn! 4 times now. 4 times had our blades crossed. But this time, the position of Norosei's hands began to change. It looked like he was clutching the guard of the sword now. And then his sword began to writhe, laying out an eerie noise as malleable mechanisms groaned. The blade's edge then split in two, opening into a pair of scissors that was then thrust toward my very chest. That alteration, right then, I came to realize it would mean the end of me. I countered, swinging my sword down in front of me. But I was too late. Its forked point sank straight into my chest. A callous smile formed on Norosei's lips. He loosened his grasp on the guard, and the colossal scissors snapped shut. I think about it, any wound from a D-sword would basically eliminate any nerves that were there whatsoever. My chest, my ribs, and my lungs were all devoured. I desperately stumbled back, Right when I did that, Norose swept his arm straight across. My own fresh blood danced before my eyes. Pain spiked throughout my entire body. Even though my senses were supposed to have been numbed, I was on the verge of screaming out with whatever remained of my lungs. But even so, I clenched my teeth and endured it. My chest had been thoroughly minced. If not for stepping back when I did, he would have hit my heart. Massive quantities of blood continued to spray out. I nearly toppled over, but I caught myself at the last second. I can't die here. I didn't come this far just to die. I ignored Norose. Instead of him, I approached NoAH and Rimi, the latter of which was collapsed on the ground. It took every fiber of my being, but I did it all the same. Raising her head from the ground, Rimi looked in my direction. She was likely exhausted. There was no way her body had any strength left. As fatigue, or maybe just my injuries, continued to wear me down, my vision grew blurrier. I wasn't sure what sort of face Rimi was making as she looked at me. I didn't meet her gaze. I couldn't bear for her to see me like this, bloody and beaten to a pulp. This was the sole, minuscule bit of pride I had left. Even on my deathbed, that was where I drew the line. I advanced toward NoAH. My D-sword was already within range. Oddly enough, Norose stayed behind me, ignoring that I was leaving him behind. He's gonna unintentionally put his code into it, I guess. All of a sudden, a cheerful melody began to ring throughout the dome. You may pass. NoAH towered over me. The sound emanating from it became even more shrill. Deep within all its majesty, I sensed something strange and enigmatic moving about. For a split second, I flinched, albeit slowly. I managed to take a stance with the blade at my hip. I aimed towards NoAH's nearly organic-looking, tube-covered exterior, and bulldozed it with my D-sword. Oh gosh, is there some giant monster in there or something? That was when I noticed, at some point or another, NoAH had vanished from my sight, and now, somehow, I was standing with my back to it. I knew for a fact that I had just been trying to destroy it. There wasn't a single damn reason for me to have turned around, and yet, that was the direction I was facing. In the very center of my blurred vision, Norose was the one standing there, not NoAH. I turned myself around, swinging my D-sword at it for the second time. Except, even though I'd fully intended to turn around, I hadn't. I had the will to turn myself around, and I'd even made the motion to do so. And yet, the end result was one where I hadn't actually turned around. I was hit with a wave of utter confusion.
NoAH の自己防衛機能とでも言うべきものです。
Norose's quiet voice resounded from within the dome, pooling and mixing together with the melody of You May Pass.
近づく者の心に干渉し、意志を歪ませる。NoAHには誰も近寄れません。私以外に。
When he finished speaking, he leisurely walked closer to me. Then, as if it was the easiest thing in the world, he raised the colossal D-sword above his head. I clenched my teeth. I'd lost a lot of blood. I couldn't think clearly. Even though I didn't have the slightest bit of sensation in my right hand, I I shoved the pain and the fact I couldn't move it properly aside, and lifted it up in a desperate attempt to deflect the next blow. And then, the D-sword that had somehow still remained attached to my hand with the cord was sent flying by a staggering impact. It tumbled across the floor, far, far away from me. It was astonishing seeing it off. Fixing my gaze back in front of me, I was met with Norose's sneering figure. And then, as if in warning, as if to urge my mind forward, the melody changed.
君の存在を否定してあげましょう。
Norose's stance told me he was already prepared to strike again. He was about to bring that sword crashing down on me. It was all too overwhelming, all too devastating, all too brutal. That was what his D-sword. And it was coming down on me while I was completely unarmed. I had no way of stopping his strike. I was a sitting duck. Damn it! Rimi forced her way between Norose and me. Her soft touch enveloped my face. I felt Rimi's chest. She had wrapped her arms around me, almost like a tender embrace. She was protecting me from Norose. Norose sighed quietly, lowering his sword. Rimi had saved me once again, even though I told her I was here to save her. How fucking pathetic was that? Hit with a wave of intense frustration, I slithered my right hand onto her body and thrusted it inside her blouse. I felt the sensation of the coarse, warm underwear lying on top her skin. Then I felt the pain of the gashes in my chest. Then the pain of my amputated left hand. Then the pain of my dislocated right arm. Then the pain of my dysfunctional lungs as I struggled to breathe. With the warmth I felt now, surely I could heal all of it. Mimi's underwear, Mimi's bare skin. With a gasp, I got off of her. When I realized what I'd been trying to do, I was genuinely shocked. Even though I'd gotten off of her, Rumi tightly clutched her chest and continued to sob sadly. She'd been protecting me. Why had I done that? Why the hell had I done that? Especially at a time like this. Why was I the one making Rimi cry? Yeah, why the hell did you do that?
本当は先畑凛を犯したいんでしょ。
No. My own voice echoed within my mind. Shocked, I swallowed back my saliva. What was so shocking to me? The fact that he was right? Because he'd seen through me? But who was he to begin with? It was my own voice. my inner voice, my true nature.
ここで物にしておかないと将軍に寝取られちゃう。あんなしわくちゃ野郎にリメはやられちゃうんだよ。寝取られるなんて嫌じゃねえ。まあもうすでにやられちゃってる可能性もあるけどさ。
My true nature continued whispering to me, "Stop it. Stop saying this shit. I don't believe a single word you're saying." I couldn't cover my ears even if I wanted to, considering my lack of a left hand. Mimi was just lying there, sobbing, unable to fix her messy clothes. Just seeing her face like that shattered my heart.
片思いでいいとか綺麗事言ってないでさ。犯しちゃえ。ノロセはそれをする時間ぐらい待ってくれるってよ。どうせ僕はもうすぐ死ぬんだ。恨まれたってへでもないって。やりたいことやって死のうよ。僕のこのかわいそうな境遇ならここでちょっとひどいことやったってしょうがなかったで許されるよ。
It was just a delusion. Something that was a bad habit of mine. Things could take a turn for the worse if I didn't stop listening. The current would drag me away. My weak-minded nature was luring me to the path of least resistance, toward a really bad path. But I couldn't let it drag me away. Not now.
それにリミは僕に同情してくれてた。それならむしろやらしてくれるべきだ。犯せよ。死ぬ前に童貞捨てようよ。ダメだ!
I screamed, to shatter my weak mind, to blow it straight to hell. Luckily, it seemed to have worked. Rimi had even stopped crying. She lowered the hands covering her face, and then she glared at me with ice-cold eyes.
つまんない男。
Those few words were all it took for my mind to be swallowed by a cascade of dark emotions. And as I swung myself at Rimi, with a staggering force, an enormous stake burst up from the concrete floor. The sharp edge of the stake pierced straight into my crotch. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. My legs were floating in the air. Even if I wanted to run away, I couldn't. The stake gradually tore its way farther and farther into my body. It was excruciatingly painful, but not enough to kill me. The stake continued to grow, lifting me a whole meter into the air. Any form of movement sent a jolt of pain through my groin. I was completely unable to move. Someone save me. I cast my bleeding eyes down toward Rimi. Is that not actually Rimi? But without even looking at me, she walked straight to Norase's side. Then, as if exhausted of all strength, she crouched to the ground. Both Norase and Rimi simply stared at me, at the mortifying display. Neither of them had any form of expression as they watched. Neither of them had any interest in saving me.
知っていますか？かつて拷問刑として串刺しは世界中のあちこちで用いられていました。この拷問の特徴は死ぬまで3日ほどかかるということです。自らの体重によって徐々にその杭は体に食い込んでいく。ポイントは杭の先端はそれほど尖らせないことです。それにより 臓器を傷つけることがなくなり、死ぬまでの期間が延びるわけです。最終的に杭の先端が口や肩から突き破れば処刑は終了。見守っていてあげますよ。3日間、あなたが死ぬまでに。彼女も同じ考えのようですし。
Remy nodded in response to his words.
もっともその前に胸や腕の傷のせいで失血死に至る方が早いかもしれません。
It's a delusion. A delusional attack. That was what I told myself. In reality, I wasn't really impaled. I was just standing in front of NoAH too. I was only hallucinating. I believed that to be true. I had to believe it. 3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes, 259,200 seconds. If I can endure it for that long, the delusion will end. It has to. If I just sleep for a bit or pass out, it'll go by a lot quicker. Those were my thoughts. But I couldn't do either of those things. The pain wouldn't let me. And that was what made this such pure, unrelenting torture. I was gonna go insane if this went on. Even though only a moment ago I'd been thinking about trying to endure it, I'd spiraled straight into despair. Considering the extreme amount of time left before my death, despair was the sole emotion that hadn't drained directly out of me. Just kill me already. How much time had passed? I didn't see a clock, so I had no clue. I wanted to see a clock, but I knew that if I did see one, the hands sluggishly ticking by would probably shatter my spirit completely. I clenched my teeth. Sweat was oozing off my body in droves. Thanks to that, my throat had gone dry. I moistened it by swallowing the blood that was trickling in. Inside my body, I could feel the state continuously shoving aside my internal organs as it wedged itself even deeper into me. I could feel it very clearly, like a countdown to my inevitable death. Soon enough, it arrived at my minced chest. After that, it pierced through my throat. It skewered me straight through the mouth. The pain and shock was pushing my sanity to its limits. The pain kept me in a 5-minute cycle of passing out, waking up, then passing back out again. I came to understand something. Every time I fainted, my body would go limp, and the stake dug into me even faster. Naturally, the pain grew to incomparable levels when that happened. Then it would wake me back up. Unable to move, my body would writhe in torment. Then I'd pass out again to escape the pain, and the gruesome cycle would repeat itself. Even when I was conscious, I was entirely in a daze. It seemed the pain had somehow faded a little, too. My vision had gone dim. Was it nighttime? Not that it mattered, considering the lack of windows in the dome. I supposed it was probably because of how much blood I'd lost. Blood trickled from my chest and arms, albeit not a whole lot. If it kept dripping out, maybe I could die peacefully from that instead of being impaled. Realizing that, I attempted to swing around my left arm, hardly any of which remained below the elbow. But it didn't even twitch. No doubt my nerves were already dead. Was it really a delusion? When was it going to end? Would it ever actually end? It made me believe it was a delusion to begin with. How could I know it was a delusion? What if it was all reality? If I endured it, I'd just die anyway. Enduring it didn't mean shit, but I was enduring it anyway. That was stupid. Only a dumbass would do that. I was an idiot. Die. Not the accuse of no kind. No, actually fucking die. I should die right now. I was sick of all the pain. I was sick of all the suffering. Bite your tongue off. Do that, and you'll be at peace soon after. Just let me out of here. This was all a delusion, right? My chest continued to hemorrhage. I couldn't breathe. No matter how much oxygen I tried to suck in, my throat would only make a stupid wheezing sound. I looked down, only to be met with a stake peeking through the holes in my chest. Struggling for oxygen as my mouth flapped open and shut, I violently vomited out blood. The fact I was about to die brought me peace of mind.
そろそろですね。
It was Norose's voice. The bastard was right in front of me. But I couldn't see him. In fact, I couldn't see a thing. Being impaled had left me in so much agony for so long that I'd completely forgotten about both him and Remy. I couldn't help but wonder if Remy was still close by, though it didn't really matter. I was too occupied with trying to breathe. For a good while now, I'd been dedicating every nerve and every last ounce of strength just toward doing that.
君が無事死ぬ前に彼女を始末しておきましょう。
I wasn't exactly sure what he was talking about, nor did I have the chance to think about it.
私を殺すの？
へえ、そういうことです。遺言をどうぞ。
ごめん、タク。タクのこと助けてあげられなかった。
I heard Remy's final scream, then the sound of someone toppling over. I imagined that Remy had just been shot and killed. I didn't feel a single pang of emotion. Something else took priority. I returned to working on breathing, and then I felt shock at how I'd done that. What was the meaning in any of this? Why did I struggle so hard to keep on breathing? Wasn't it just too much? Something hot steamed down my cheeks. I was probably crying, but there wasn't any way to be sure of that. I tried my best to endure everything that I had dealt with so far, but so close to the 3-day limit, the meaning of doing so had entirely been lost. I'm sorry, Remy. I should be the one to apologize. I couldn't protect you. There wasn't any point in living anymore. I let my body go limp. The weight of that caused my body to sink even deeper. I felt a foreign object working its way up my throat. Breathing became impossible. Something was driving itself up through me. I came back to my senses. The feeling of a foreign object in my throat disappeared. I wasn't impaled anymore. The only blood on me was from my left arm and chest. When did reality end and the delusion begin? My brain couldn't begin to process it fast enough. I didn't understand a thing about the situation. In front of me was Norose, D-sword raised. If that's what everybody who he's taken code from has had to go through, then oh my gosh. That was horrible.
帰ってきましたか。あなたが体験した3日間は現実では1秒しか経っていませんが。
やっぱり妄想。
After muttering that to myself in relief, Norose's D-sword flashed as fast as lightning. My body's top and bottom halves began to fall out of alignment. My vision fell. It sank downward, even though my legs were still standing right there. Everything above my waist toppled to the floor. My torso had been cleaved clean off. The cross-section was all too beautiful to behold. I inexplicably fixed my gaze on my lower half. It was a reality I didn't want to accept. Or was it just another delusion? If it was, that would have been nice. Please let it be a delusion. Mimi was calling me, in a voice that seemed so sad. She was calling me.
その状態でも死ぬまで数分は持つはずです。元医師である私が言うのだから確かですよ。その間にコードサンプルを取ることにしましょうか。
I crawled, dragging my body away with my right hand alone. I headed straight for Rimi's voice. I want to feel you there, Rimi. I have to save you. Rimi. I dragged myself forward with my right hand. Then again. I reached out. But I had no idea where Rimi was. I didn't reach her. I didn't reach anything at all.
しぶとい男だ。
Crunch. I felt my bones grind to dust. Norose's dress shoe trampled my outstretched right hand.
さすが化け物と言うべきですか。
そのノロセの足が蜃気楼のように揺れた。床のタイルの模様がぼんやりとし始めて、天地が回転する。床と天井が逆になる。僕は天井に這いつくばっている。両断された腰からものすごい勢いで血が噴き出す。
What is going on?
全開にした蛇口のように血が体から抜けていく。そのまま腕の傷口を通って内臓までが流れ出る。意識がスーッと遠くなる。でも完全には途切れない。血だまりができて、僕はその深紅の海に身を横たえている。ドクンドクンと鼓動する心臓が僕の目の前に転がっていて、血だまりに波紋を作り、その波紋をぼんやり見ていたら、僕の形が崩れた。人としての形を維持できない。僕と世界との境界が消失する。肉が溶け、骨がゴムのように曲がり、眼球は四角になり、口から裏返った灰がこぼれ出し、 神経は数万キロメートルも引っ張られ、脳はシワの一つ一つを丁寧に伸ばされ、体はブヨブヨになる。空気に溶けていく。右手が糸のように伸びてプラネタリウムを出ていく。それは飴細工のように渋谷の空をさまよってコーネリアスタワーにくるくる巻きつく。何度も何度も何度も。分かれた足が膨れてる。ブクブクと水風船みたい。パンパンに皮膚が伸びてギチギチ音を立ててる。液状化。肉も骨もとろけてふくらはぎに溜まってる。腰からニョキって小さな頭が生えて、ぎょろりとした白い目が僕を見たよ。そしたら僕の頭がぐしゃって潰された。どっちの頭かはよくわかんない。潰れてトロトロになって、ビルの床、コンクリートの分子の隙間を抜けて落ちていく。地上へビューって地面に作るどろりとした脳みその水たまり。もぞもぞもごもごジュルジュルドロドロプルプルビヨンビヨンビチャビチャぐじゅぐじゅぐちゃりぐちゃり。僕は二つになる。二つが四つになる。四つが八つになる。八つが四つに。二つが八つに。四つが四つに。どんどん増えてどんどん減る。僕がいっぱい。僕がいない。僕は何？僕って何？何って僕？僕？何？何区がナボに、ナボ、ボに、なく、ぼ、な。
君は妄想なんかじゃないよ。
That's whatever Notomy saw, I think.
レータ
見てごらん。
Bloody Goral.
西条七海が祈る。兄と共に収容された病院。怪我人があふれた待合室の片隅にうずくまり、実の兄のしわくちゃの手を握りしめて、右手の痛みに耐えて、目を閉じて祈る。もう一人の兄の無事を。楠木優愛が祈る。
Are we having one of these JRPG moments? Oh my gosh. We're actually
倒壊
doing
したビル
this.
の瓦礫。そこに埋もれるように横たわるコンテナの中で 彼の美少女フィギュアの一つを握りしめて、地震と火事で醜く変形してしまったフィギュアたちの姿に感じた胸の痛みに耐え、目を閉じて祈る。彼女を許してくれた少年の無事を。岸本綾瀬が祈る。避難所となっている水明学園。その校舎の屋上で空を見上げて、神話が書かれた文庫本を握りしめて、崩壊した渋谷を覆う不特定多数の妄想が見せる悪意の痛みに耐え、目を閉じて祈る。彼女の歌を、彼女の話を聞いてくれた少年の無事を。折原梢が祈る。新鮮駅の薄暗いホーム。青い瀬名の震える手を握りしめて、足の傷の痛みに耐えて、目を閉じて祈る。心の声で語り合ったクラスメートの少年の無事を。青い瀬名が祈る。横たわる父の傍らに座り、父の冷たくなった手を握りしめて、最後まで素直になれなかった後悔の痛みに耐えて、目を閉じて祈る。彼女のお願いに不器用ながら答えようとしてくれた少年の無事を、咲畑りみが祈る。冷たい床に横たわりながら、彼へ伸ばした自らの手をきつく握りしめて、傷だらけの彼の姿を見て感じた。締め付けられるような胸の痛みに耐えて、目を閉じて祈る。自分が守ろうとした、自分を助けに来てくれた少年の無事を。
僕は何もできなかった。君が行動したんだ。その結果としてみんなが君のことを見てきた。君という周囲共通認識はとっくに出来上がっているんだ。これからは、いや、もうすでに君こそが。
僕
Is Shogun remaking Takumi?
僕は、君は誰？僕はその声が聞こえた瞬間に、意識が僕を固定した。ぐちゃぐちゃにかき回されていた世界が一気に収束する。混沌が僕の理想度を形作って収束する。僕は僕としての形に戻る。世界は世界としての形に戻る。僕は僕だ。
I am all of me. I can see clearly now. All my wounds had healed. My top and bottom halves were connected. I was standing on my own 2 feet. The pain was entirely gone. Serenity filled my heart.
妄想によく打ち勝ったね。
Oh, it was just still a delusion,
僕
I
の最
guess.
後の力を君に託すよ。
noticed Rimi at the edge of my vision. She was okay. She was looking at me. Tears were falling down her face. Don't cry. Summoning my strength, I grasped the D-sword's hilt. I ascertained its feelings. My arms worked better than ever. I had completely regenerated.
これは実に興味深いです。この化け物。
Yeah, I guess he did actually slice him in half and then he regenerated. I focused my eyes on Norose.
確かに僕は化け物だよ。でもこれが
So I can rescue Rimi. So I can destroy NoAH too.
僕が望んだ妄想だ。
Whoosh! Norose's response was swift. He had yet to harvest the code sample of Nishijo Takumi. The delusion was supposed to have cornered the boy and shattered his psyche, but now the tables had turned. And that he could not allow. I guess he did, I guess it was just a delusion then. Norose closed the gap between himself and Takumi. Taking a specific angle, he swung his D-sword from below. With a D-sword that could cleave any known object, he diagonally carved through Takumi's chest. The target's durability made no difference. Killing a person with it was as simple as slicing through a block of gelatin. With one quick swipe from Norose, Takumi's body was split into pieces. His head, right arm, and right shoulder all slid cleanly off his body. Internal organs littered the floor, but not a single drop of blood fell from them. The lower half of Takumi's body began to give way. He braced himself. I managed to plant his feet. In the following moment, the cross-section of his wound began to undulate and squirm. Bubbling noise ensued. Then he regenerated. Even though his body had been cleaved apart a mere second ago, already a new head, right arm, and shoulder had been born. His old head and internal organs remained where they had slid free from him.
痛覚は遮断した。
With a single step, Takumi approached Norose. Norose clicked his tongue, then turned over his D-sword.
肉体の形を捨てたがゆえにいかなる形をも取れるということですか。
あんたの見せてくれた妄想のおかげだよ。
He was unable to retain his shape as a human being. He had taken in the delusion and made it his own. He's a slime monster now. This was not regeneration, but replacement. Missing parts replenished. Flesh and bone were produced once again, while propagating infinitely from the dust within his body. The shape was not fixed. Like an amoeba, like a collection of slime, he could change himself freely. Become a dragon! That was the reason Takumi called himself a monster. Takumi took yet another step toward Norose. Norose's frustration increased. Gripping the hilt, he thrusted his D-sword at the approaching Takumi. Takumi's head found itself between a colossal pair of scissors.
脳を失えば妄想はできないでしょう。
But that's what you don't know. That's what you don't realize, Norose. He never had a brain to begin with. Takumi's head was crushed. It split like a watermelon. Blood and gray matter burst forth. Everything above the neck was gone, and yet Takumi's body remained. Regeneration, replacement, was instantaneous. As soon as his heel hit the ground, as if nothing had happened, as if he had been entirely replaced. His head returned right to where it had been, without a single scratch. Norosei awakened to an understanding. He could not win this fight. Physical attacks with his D-sword were useless. The delusional attack denying the boy's reason for existence had been taken in and used for an alternate purpose. The current Nishijo Takumi was all too removed from human normalcy, all too distorted of an existence, all too fitting as a monster. And yet, despite it all, Norosei had no intention of conceding. His next thought was to utilize NoAH's power to bombard Takumi with innumerable antiparticles. Bombardment with antiparticles could transform any known existence into negative matter, ultimately ending in self-collapse. If disruption from the surface was not viable, then collapse must be undertaken from within.
そうなんだね。
Norosei's thoughts had been read by Takumi. The shine of Takumi's D-sword transformed from red to black. A black flame enveloped the blade. It wriggled forth, extending outward. Its shape resembled that of a dark, colossal serpent.
そして現れるのよ。
Woo! It roamed throughout the dome as if constrained by it. Toward the ceiling, toward the floor, as though it was licking them up, as though it was scraping them away. It simply consumed.
邪神の口説き大者。あらゆる崩壊を飲み込み、邪神の身を砕くことのできる。糖質にして異質なる。
The body of the colossal serpent was composed of antiparticles. With a mere touch, it could send any known object into self-collapse. A torrent of destruction composed of near-infinite greed.
触手芸はあんまり好みじゃないけど。
Very important time to have that shit. Tentacle porn. A genre of pornography depicting women being subjected to various horrible acts perpetrated by a tentacled monster. Tentacle porn is very prominent in eroge, to the point of it becoming its own subgenre. These games should not be played by anyone under the age of 18. No shit. There and then, Takumi's D-sword swung, its pointed tip fixed on Norosei. The dark serpent, winding itself in a coil, curved its body like a whip. Its jaw snapped at Norosei.
まさかこれほどとは。
Not once had Norosei ever seen such a phenomenon from a D-sword. He could not discern whether it was the hidden power of all gigalomaniacs, or merely Takumi's delusion. The dark fangs eroded Norosei's body. He began to collapse, all too slowly, like a frog slowly dissolving in the belly of a snake. Darkness swallowed him. He felt no pain. By nature, his death should have been instant. But that was not what Takumi wished for. Realizing this, Norosei's lips twisted into a derisive smile. Norosei had no fear of death, but could say that the ideals he pursued had been accomplished with the completion of NoAH 2.
私を殺してもノア2には誰も近づけない。永久期間なんですよ、それは。
Perpetual motion machine, a device that can continue operation without receiving energy from external sources.
人類を未来永劫にわたって管理し続ける ただ座して眺めているだけではない、人の幸福のために干渉してくる人口の神なのです。
Norosei was God's inventor, so to speak. As long as NoAH continued to exist, mankind would not perish, and the eternal utopia Norosei sought would become real. However,
あんたなら近づけるんでしょ。
the serpent's body wriggled and writhed with Norosei in its grasp, lifting his body into the air.
それならあんたは鍵だ。
Norosei was astonished. Soon enough, his face changed into an expression of pure agony. The serpent swung about his body with ease. Takumi shot a glance at Rimi. Their eyes met. Just what was Rimi feeling as she watched him? Reading her mind would have been effortless. And yet, Takumi did nothing of the sort. It seems I was able to save you after all. He quickly averted his eyes. His gaze then shifted to the still humming NoAH, the throne of God, where none could stand foot, the cradle which showed naught but dreams of bliss.
ごめん。
He apologized to no one in particular.
僕は人類にとっての敵かもね。
The eternal utopia this device would have brought, a future without conflict. Takumi would extinguish them with his own two hands. Was that right, or was it wrong? Takumi could not give the answer to that.
でも神話でもよくあるでしょ。神だって女絡みでうだうだやってる。だから僕も。
Will sacrifice the happiness of mankind out of love for a girl. Takumi, dew sword in hand, bent his arms in a giant arc.
突き破れ！
Woo! He thrust it forth like a javelin. The colossal serpent of darkness charged straight ahead. With the bait known as Norosei impaled by its tip, it flew straight toward NoAH. An enormous serpent of antiparticles, capable of terminating any known object. It had no will of its own. Thus, it was not something that could have been warped nor distorted. But the greedy impulse to destroy, using Norosei as the key, the delusional barrier, was easily smashed to pieces. Woo! But we still haven't solved the new gen case. When had the rain begun to fall? There had just been a huge explosion, and its blast blew my body away like it was nothing more than a ragdoll. Next thing I knew, I found myself lying here. Those eyes were always watching me. The stare pierced through the thick, pitch-black rain clouds. It poured down on me like rain. Don't look at me. My body couldn't stop shivering, not from the chill of the rain, but rather the ice-cold rubble against my back. So terribly cold. A gaze pierced me from the heavens. Who it belonged to, I couldn't say. As if to escape it, I raised my head to look at the environment around me. There I saw a ruined city. There I saw despair. There I saw death. There I saw nothingness. Not a soul was there. Not a soul was moving. Not a soul was left alive. The only thing I could hear was the sound of the rain continuing to pour. At this rate, everything, both the living and the dead, would it all be gently embraced and washed away? How nice it would be if all of this was just a delusion, but that didn't seem to be the case. I couldn't move my body. I could only move my eyes and neck, and even then, just barely. I couldn't use that monstrous power from before. My body was shivering, but that was nothing more than a physiological phenomenon. It wasn't happening by my own will. I didn't want my body to tremble. If I couldn't move it freely, then it wasn't my body. Or maybe I'd never had free will ever since I was born. Nobody knows exactly where the soul resides. Bearing that in mind, how could anyone say that there was a soul inside this body of mine? But then where exactly was I now? Was I really here? Was I anywhere at all? In this shattered world, where all stood still, all that could be heard was the rain of death. Suddenly, another sound echoed through it. A solitary existence began to emerge from the sea of nothingness. Who are you? Is your skin so pale because it had been numbed by the chill of the rain? Or was it because you were already dead? And yet, the girl wasn't shivering, and those eyes of hers, nearly hidden by her bangs. Don't look at me. They looked so terribly sad. They looked as if they held a hint of madness. They looked as if they reflected nothing. If she and I were the only ones left in the world, if we stared into each other's eyes like this for all eternity, would my world be reduced to the reflection in her eyes? Would her world be reduced to the reflection in my eyes? The only thing reflected in her eyes was me. The only thing reflected in my eyes was her. When I thought of it that way, the world immediately seemed so much smaller. Suddenly, a flash of static reached my ears, one endlessly beautiful, yet deeply discordant. She lowered her head and spread her arms wide, almost as if preparing to take off, to soar high above the rain clouds, or as if trying to catch all of the falling rain.
あなたを見つめる妄想
From where I was on the ground, I couldn't see the expression on that lowered head of hers. Behind this thin veil of rain, just what kind of face are you making? An angel? Were those dancing feathers of light blessing me? Or I see. I finally understand. She's going to use that to kill me. The girl slowly kneeled to the ground before my collapsed body. With her head still lowered She gently took my own in her hands. I surrendered my body to her grasp. I was just relieved that she wasn't looking at me.
殺さなくちゃいけないの。
In my ear, I heard a whisper, garbled by static. It was as beautiful as it was discordant.
ごめんね。
There's nothing to apologize for. If I don't disappear, the other me, the real me, will die. So, that's why I'm okay with this. In fact, I'm really glad I get to be erased by you. It's not a bad end for a monster like me. I don't have any regrets. A warm, soft, gentle, sweet sensation. And miraculously, as if it were an anesthetic, the shivering in my body slowly began to die down. Her soft breath tickled my cheeks. It smelled so sweet. Suddenly, I sensed something pressing against my chest. The large sword she held tore through my skin, bored into my flesh, weaved through my bones, and slowly sank through to the center of my body. But, gifted with the anesthesia of her kiss, I no longer felt any pain. I would never have imagined that I would get such a kind death. Just the thought of it broke my heart, leaving me on the verge of tears. Trying to hide them, I looked past the girl's head and up toward the ashen sky, where the rain continued to fall. Welp! And that was the Common Roots ending, apparently. We still got a ways to go. There's apparently character roots, but like, how exactly is that gonna work? Is Remy just gonna like get cucked or something? That would be kind of whiplash after this compelling romance we've been given, but who knows? Maybe they twisted his arm or something, I don't know. But, I mean, the writer's arm, I mean. But, yeah. Well, we know the nature of NoAH 2 now and, what Norosei's goal was, but, like, I think probably what the greater plot here is gonna evolve is probably the Divine Church or whatever. Because, like, yeah, that dude died, but, like, he's the supposed second generation founder, not the original founder, I'd suppose. So, like, and it seems like that founder is the mastermind behind the new gen murders, and we gotta learn why the murders are like that in the first place, I guess. Like, what their objective is. There's kind of like two factions here. Nozomi and the church. And I guess also the Meiwa party, but who cares about them? Yeah. In regards to that, it seems like we have about 3 murders figured out. They didn't outright confirm it with Suwa, but it does seem heavily implied at any rate that he was the crucifixion killer. Then we have the man-child and the numbskull murders figured out, so... I see you there, Spider! Anyways, What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, there's, of course, Darth Spider. Who was that? Sua seemed to have the helmet, but, like, it seems like whoever they are is also in a wheelchair. And they're the one that gave the instructions to that group of delinquents to beat up Takumi, it sounds like. Because if I recall correctly, they specifically mentioned him being dressed like Darth Spider. Maybe this Darth Spider guy is the original founder, because I'd suppose he'd probably have to be very old at this point. The Silent Sky ending. CG Library is now available. Sound Library is now available. Movie Library. Shortcut. Saving system data. Please do not turn off the system. So, yep, that's apparently not the end, but that will be the end of today's episode, because that was a long one, and I'm gonna need some time to, rest, because that was quite the ride we went on. Whole section of gaslighting me into thinking maybe I'd gotten a bad ending somehow. Damn. It really was a battle of delusions, I guess. But, yep. We still got a lot to figure out, and some girls to possibly romance, I guess. I mean, that's at least how it goes in Steins Gate anyways, but I don't know about this game at least. Maybe Steins Gate's the exception. But, yeah. I'm looking forward to figuring out the truth here in these, final few episodes that are coming up, I guess. I'll, probably have to do a lot more editing, because a lot of it's gonna be me skipping through the, oh dang. 9 endings. Huh. And whose eyes are those eyes, percent? But, see. Okay. Yeah, let me. Skip mode. Red only. Okay, good. Okay. So, yeah. What I said there during the credits, that's my prediction for now, I guess. If I had to predict any more culprits, well, I mean, it's clear by this point with NoAH and all that, the swords aren't just limited to, the 7 Black Knights that ISA's been talking about, so somebody's got a D-sword, and they're the one that's cut up those 3 guys. And I assume Darth Spider is the, murderer of the first group dive. But, yeah. Who could the others possibly be? I mean, if I had to make a random guess, I guess, like, Misumi. Because, like, let's be real, in a story like this, where there's, like, whole cast, primarily girls, there's, like, that one dude friend who just ends up being evil for some reason. Like, there's always the one guy friend who turns out to be evil. Like, again, 50-50 with Misumi here. I could see it being either way. Honestly, I don't know, like, you could just say that's me covering my bases so that I'm not embarrassed when I get it wrong or something, but, like, I genuinely would not be surprised by either outcome of him just being an idiot or being this psychotic, divine church guy. I don't know. But, hope you guys will, stick with me for the, concluding chapters to this ride. And hopefully I can get this editing for the next few episodes done in a timely manner as well. Because that's probably going to be a lot. I don't want to force you guys to watch me skipping through a bunch of text. But, yep. I will see you guys next time.